Welcome to TypeScript FM, the friendly podcast for TypeScript developers where we bring you news, updates, and interviews from the community with plenty of tomfoolery sprinkled in. I'm your host, Kamran and Erik, and I'm joined by my co-host and best bud, Erik Onerheim. Together, we're the two TypeScript fools. Welcome to the show. Hey, how's it going, Erik?
It's going okay. Yeah, I've been going real busy. It's been real busy, and I've got a lot of good news lately. So,
that's good. So we both live in Minnesota.
Yeah.
We're only 20 minutes away from each other. We had a 4-day weekend because of the school closure and Martin Luther King Day. But I'll get into it. But like, what did you do over the weekend?
I locked myself in my office and in a coffee shop and just hammered on Excalibur all weekend.
Well, that's nice.
I got remarkably little done. For a 4-day weekend, I spent a lot of time thinking more than writing. So
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe productivity is not measured in keystrokes.
No,
Weekend.
All the thinking is good though, because you're getting geared up for the next release and all that.
Yeah, for sure.
We had the pleasure of working together on Friday because I work from home, right? And there's no one here during the day. And so usually I'm looking for an excuse to go out. So when you said, hey, I'm taking the day off, I'm like, let's co-work together. So we did. And we got a lot done. We got the cover art design for the show.
Yep.
And then we also picked out that sweet intro music. What do you think of that?
I'm a fan.
I think it combines both of our styles, right? So I like, metal and rock, and you like retro game music, and we both like, chiptune music. It actually reminded me of Anna Managuchi. Have you listened to them?
Oh, a long time ago. I used to be an avid fan.
Well, so this artist is Kubi, and you can find him on Spotify. And so when I was looking for music, the way I usually look for music whenever we're, working on games is look by licensing first. So like, first of all, we need to find music that we can actually use, commercial or not, right? And so this is all CC by 0, share like. So as long as we have attribution, we can use it. And then, we purchased it, so we have the rights to use it. But definitely, I included a link to his Spotify. So if you want to listen to the full album, he has a lot of music just like this. So definitely check him out. Apparently, I was looking through the comments. Apparently, the YouTube channel Pokemon Trainer uses them a lot as backing tracks.
Oh,
so,
cool.
So pretty popular, I think.
Yeah, we should poke around, but there's another chiptune artist, and I'm forgetting their name off the top of my dome, but a lot of streamers use them, but they're covers of like classic rock songs,
nice.
But like in a chiptune style. And they're really catchy. There's no vocals. It's just all instrumental.
Nice. Well, I asked about the weekend because, as you know, it was like in the negative 10, negative 18 over the weekend. So I've got 2 school-age kids and then one, in daycare. And we were basically like, we can't go outside. So like here we have this 4-day weekend and we're stuck inside. So we managed to do, some like indoor playground type stuff. But otherwise we're just mostly stuck inside playing Nerf war with each other, letting my son shoot me in the head with his Nerf gun. So
yeah. Yeah. My daughter just slaps me in the face. So yeah.
Nice.
She's kind of roughhousing lately. She's getting into that toddler phase where she likes to play a little rough. So she's playing a little rough with Papa.
That's funny. Well, we should probably get into the news. So the biggest thing I think we want to talk about in this episode that you've probably already heard by now is that Node 23 is going to support TypeScript. So we're going to dive into the article from Marco Ippolito, who is on the Node.js Technical Steering Committee. He made the PR. He has a great article on like what was the motivation, what's actually supported. And then Dr. Axel Roschmeyer, or otherwise known as Duality, has another great sort of deep dive into the new features. So we're going to cover that. But before we do, there's some other news that sort of came across on Blue Sky that we noticed. Erik, I heard that there's native TypeScript support coming to 11t, and I know that you use.
Yeah, indeed. 11t is my soup du jour for static sites, at least for mine. All of my static sites for my business and my personal blog are all 11t based.
Nice.
And up until this point, as a TypeScript Andy, it hurt me deeply to just use JavaScript. But now there's native TypeScript support coming to 11T. There's a PR out for it. I think it's 11T issue 3616. The biggest thing that's going to be like a huge help is the configuration options. So those will be strongly typed, which is kind of the biggest thing I run into. I'm like, what can I even configure on this? So that'll be a big help. So 11T, getting native support for TypeScript, that's going to be huge.
Yeah,
I'm going to be upgrading as soon as it's available.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that it's not technically out yet, even as we record this, but there's a PR open for it. So does that mean that you were using JavaScript only when you were doing 11T? Does that mean that it would support TypeScript, but you just had to do a bunch of extra configuration for it, or it did not support TypeScript at all?
I think there probably was, I probably need to do a little more research into this. There probably was a types package that was community based, I imagine, because it's so popular. I'd be surprised if there wasn't. For me, I wasn't using it. I was just doing the JavaScript thing. I don't know why. I just did the JavaScript thing.
Yeah, use the default template.
So, and my configuration is pretty simple. So I was able to get away with, just hand rolling some, small JavaScript setup. But if you're looking for like a no nonsense static site generator that's JavaScript, TypeScript based, 11T is one to check out.
Yeah, I've definitely heard multiple people say it's great. And I've followed Zach Leatherman for a long time, and I know he's a smart dude making
he's
sweet
cool
stuff. Yep. Okay, so next up, ESLint 9.18 also has stabilized zero config TypeScript support. So it's no longer experimental. It's fully supported. So before this, there was experimental support for the TypeScript config, but now you don't have to do anything after 9.18. So after you upgrade, you can use it. Now the thing is that ESLint obviously is a separate tool. So if you want to run it against your TypeScript codebase, you can do that. There are no dependencies needed for Deno or Bun, but it does say that you need to use GD, the NPM package that adds support for TypeScript and ESM, if you want to use it for Node.js, but perhaps that's no longer the case with Node 23. I don't know. So that's just one thing. We'll talk a little bit more about that once we get to Node 23. What's new with TypeScript?
Yeah, some exciting developments from the TypeScript team, kind of in coordination with the Node team. They're adding an option to, I don't know if the name is finalized yet, but effectively they're adding a tsconfig option to allow you to restrict your TypeScript to erasable syntax only. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of what you need for like type stripping, is you want things that don't emit runtime JavaScript. You want things that are just erasable only. So that would like preclude any like features like enums or the auto property thing in TypeScript constructors. So like if you ever did the TypeScript constructor, like public thingy equals this, that's like kind of that emit at runtime feature that I know they're not really doing anymore, but now those are kind of vestiges of the TypeScript past, but they're kind of problematic for type stripping because they do a runtime emit. So now you can write your TypeScript. Either this will land in 5.8 or 5.9. It's not, it's not super clear. We'll include in the show notes the issue talking about it, but it's been greenlit by the TypeScript team. So it's very likely will land in 5.8 or 5.9. Yep. But it's going to be a huge boon for those using frameworks that already do type stripping like Deno or now Node 23.
Sweet. Yep. And we'll get into some of those details right after this. So last thing that's sort of newsy, and it's not directly related to TypeScript, but I think is big, especially if you're in the React ecosystem. But you may know that React 19 has finally dropped. So that was the thing we've all sort of been waiting for in the React community for a long time, almost like 2 years now, I think. So 19 finally dropped. But if you've used Create React App, which used to be the de facto way to like start a new React app, well, it no longer works since React 19 dropped, because in their dependency chain, they're using the latest version of React. So instead of pulling 18, now it pulls 19, and people are getting upset over that, rightfully, because a whole bunch of tutorials are saying use Create React App. Unfortunately, now it's been deprecated for a while. The PSA here is that if you are getting started with React, you should be using Vite. That's the sort of new way to bootstrap your React app. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like Facebook has gone back, or Meta has gone back and actually updated create React app. So hopefully somebody does that. But yeah, that that this week I saw a lot of people getting up in arms about that. So just like a PSA, make sure you're using Vite if you want to start with create React app. TypeScript FM is sponsored by Excalibur.js, the friendly TypeScript game engine for the web. Like many of you, I got into computers because I loved video games and dreamed of making one, but game development always felt a bit intimidating. Instead, I built a career in web development, though that dream of making games never really went away. Then I met Erik, who showed me I could use my HTML, CSS, and JavaScript skills to create games with just a bit of game design knowledge and the right engine. Excalibur.js makes game development approachable, offering everything you need to build 2D web games. Arcade physics, sprites, animations, input support, and integrations with tools like Tiled and Ace-Sprite. It's beginner-friendly, yet flexible enough to grow with you. Our team has published 10 games using Excalibur, all written in TypeScript. If you're a web developer looking to dip your toes into game dev or sharpen your TypeScript skills, give Excalibur.js a try at excalibur.js.com. Click the big tutorial button to start building your first game, Excalibur, a Flappy Bird clone. After that, join our friendly Discord community of web developers who love to help each other and share game dev tips. So now let's talk about TypeScript support in Node 23. So I think there's a lot of questions here, and I think we just want to start probably with what does it actually mean, and what's the motivation for doing that?
Yeah. So this is, it's a good question because like people are like, oh, is Node going to be running like the TypeScript compiler and compiling my TypeScript? The answer is no, it's not. It's going to be doing type stripping. So it's going to be grabbing the TypeScript syntax and erasing the types at runtime. And, you might be asking like, why are we doing this now? Why is this happening now? And I'm going to guess, this is my guess. No one said this, but I think there's a lot of like appetite for this now. TypeScript kind of becoming a de facto web standard, even though it's not, almost, whether you like it or not, you need to be aware of TypeScript, or you have TypeScript source that you need to work with. So this is just kind of the reality of the world now. And, again, these are all my thoughts. No one has said this to me or out loud that I know of on the core teams, but there's more competition out there. There's Deno and Bun and other runtimes up and coming that have built-in support for TypeScript in one way or another. So it's just kind of the way that we do work now.
Yep.
And before this, you needed to do some like kind of tomfoolery in Node to support it. You either using a custom loader or using GD, as you mentioned earlier, is JITI, which I think stands for just-in-time interop, but I don't know if that's actually what it stands for. I'm guessing based on, JIT is usually used as just-in-time, and then I'm like, is that inner?
Yep. Sure.
But that can import on the fly like TypeScript modules. And it also is super useful. Even if you don't use it for TypeScript, it can, side note, GD is super useful if you need to interop between Common and ESM. It provides like an abstraction layer so that you can work with both module types in your program. Because, right now we're kind of in this half in, half out state with ESM and Common, especially on the server side world. Yeah, kind of a big thing. So that's kind of where we are and why it's happening and what was before. So you want to tell me a little bit more about type stripping?
Yeah. So I think it's easy to say, or like the headlines will say Node.js now supports TypeScript, but there's more nuance there. So I think what Marco was explaining is what exactly is type stripping? What does that mean? And like what's supported and what's not supported for TypeScript? Because it's not like you said, it's not full support for TypeScript. So specifically, if you imagine your TypeScript file that you're writing, right? You've got your type annotations, the colon type. Now what type stripping does, it's kind of funny. It actually just replaces that annotation with blank spaces. And this is a specific technique that they do so that it doesn't modify the source maps. It just removes these types. It just strips them. Okay. And so then what you have left is the runnable JavaScript that then just gets fed straight into Node. So there's no transpilation. There is only transpilation if you opt into it with an experimental flag. So right now, it just does the stripping by default. And it does that using custom SWC, which is a compiler that's built in Rust. And so that doesn't generate a source map. And there are a bunch of caveats with it. So you already talked a little bit about it, but we should dive a little bit deeper into it. So runtime emit features. So enums, that's like a big one. So Erik, how come enums would not be supported? Why is that?
Yes.
Like, what does it mean to be like a runtime emit?
Yeah, so this is maybe a regrettable feature before TypeScript adopted their new policy of doing like kind of a transparent like abstraction. But in the old days, they added a enum keyword, which actually emitted code, JavaScript code, to support like an enum-ish type.
Right. It's like a JS object, right?
Yeah, it's a JavaScript object that gets emitted, and it's not like a purely like a type only thing.
Right.
Like I think nowadays the recommendation is to use like type unions or to use like a as const config object in TypeScript, which is typically what we use in my business, depending on what you're doing. If you need like an actual real string to consult, or if you are just concerned with options, you probably can get away with the type union, which just fully erases at runtime. So these emit types actually emit code. And enum is kind of well known and well hated for being kind of goofy. So that's like one example of a runtime emit feature. Another one that isn't supported is instantiated namespaces. This is not really a problem for most people in modern TypeScript, but this is like if you were using namespaces, it actually like built a object at runtime that it would like park like functions and code into.
Don't we?
A lot of people aren't using that anymore.
Don't we do that for Excalibur?
We do. Well, we kind of do something similar. We create a UMD global like that just hangs out on the window. So you could think of it as very similar, right? That's effectively what's happening with an instantiated namespace is you have this global object that now is created that's parked in the runtime. So that's one example. And then the thing that I kind of that I hinted at was those parameter props in the constructor. So like if you do like constructor public thing, it's like kind of a sugar for creating like a public property on your object. That is actually not in JavaScript. That is a TypeScript only thing to do those kind of like parameter properties on constructors, which is nice, but also requires emit because it actually like, if you look at it, it actually just fills in the constructor. When you compile it, just says, okay, this dot my property equals my property.
Okay.
For you.
So if I were a Node.js developer and I wanted to start using Node 23, what is it? Node 23.6? That's when this drops. I would still need to be aware of TypeScript features that are not going to be supported, which is why the TypeScript team is looking at that flag. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. And that'll be helpful to like just prevent the foot gun of those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
You can toggle on the experimental transform types flag in Node.
Yes.
It will do it for you. I don't know what the runtime characteristics of that are. I can't imagine it's that bad. And in that case, it will generate source maps for you. But like, I guess if I'm reading into my crystal ball, that is not preferred, because, it's behind a flag. And I think they don't want to call funk out to the TypeScript compiler if they don't have to, because it's also famously slow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So TSC is still used behind the scenes, and TSC that's the TypeScript compiler that's written in TypeScript itself. So it's not like it's written in Rust, at least not yet. And so that's slow.
Yeah.
But with the type stripping, they don't need to run TSC. So that's why it can be fast. Mm-hmm. And now there's another caveat too, which I think is important. And that's the TSX files are not technically supported, or anything that requires a TS-config JSON. But there is a little nuance there because you can still support TSX through a loader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. You can do TSX in Node. It just requires you to do what you were always doing before, and that's using a Node loader. And that's just it kind of reminds me of Webpack, but it's like you register kind of a file type and then you tell Node how to handle it. That's how loaders work. So it's very similar to like how Webpack, like the modus of operation in Webpack is like, hey, I have this file type. This is how you deal with it.
Yep.
So a similar idea, very different implementation, I think, but similar idea. But, in addition to TSX, there's also any features that require down leveling. So you can think of down leveling as like a polyfill, like it's in the spec, but it hasn't landed in all browsers or hasn't landed in all runtime. Or, like the one that I'm thinking of right now is decorators.
Yes.
Right now that requires down leveling in TypeScript.
Mm-hmm.
So that one is also not supported.
Okay. So I guess to summarize quick, if you use enums, if you use instantiated namespaces, if you use param props and class constructors, if you use decorators, those things are going to require experimental transform types. And actually, do you know for decorators, is that totally unsupported? Or is it supported with the experimental transform types?
That's a great question. I don't know.
Because
I think they might not be, but it could be because that's a good question. Because it is a type of runtime emit. So maybe experimental transform types works. I need to dig into that a little bit more. But I would say use caution with decorators.
Yep, I think it says, so I'm referencing Axel's article, and it says no support for future JavaScript that is compiled to current JavaScript. So one such feature is decorators. Those will be supported by Node.js and TypeScript when they are supported in JavaScript. So in other words, not right now.
Yeah.
So the answer is it is unsupported right now. Yep, and I think, didn't for Excalibur, we decided not to use decorators because at one point we were. Right.
We are still.
Okay.
We're using the old experimental decorators, which is divergent from the actual Acma standard decorators. There's a whole hullabaloo to switch back to the other one. So we haven't switched. I think we probably should.
So this is important because this is where the questions are going to come up. Like, I have a library that's written in TypeScript. Does this mean that I should be switching over to the Node support? And I think, at least for Excalibur, the answer is no, we can't, right? Because there's still features that we're using that are just not going to be supported.
I'd say your best bet is like the old school way of doing things, which is, grab the bundle, the compiled JavaScript and use that. And then if you need to, use your at types, or if you ship types with your package, use those.
Cool. Okay. So then I think the next part of this discussion is like, how is this different from Deno? And because this is going to bring Node.js closer and closer to what are the real differences between, Node and Deno now? Because for a long time, Node did not support ESM. They introduced it, I think, in Node 18 experimental and then stable in 20. So you can use ESM now without doing any gymnastics. And now you can use TypeScript for the most part without any gymnastics. So I think the big question is why use Deno? And I think there's a really big discussion that needs to happen with that, which is what exactly is everything related to Deno? And we're going to do a deep dive into Deno in a future episode. But I think from the high level, so I've used Deno now for a little while, practicing with Advent of Code. And I think the too long didn't read is it's the integrated tooling and developer experience. I think that's going to be the big selling point for Deno. Mm-hmm. So you've got sort of the regular stuff, right? Like Deno is rewritten from the ground up, so it doesn't have a lot of the baggage that Node comes with, right?
Yeah.
It's got promises all the way down. It's got native ESM support, but like I said, Node also now has native ESM support. Performance-wise, we were chatting about this before the show, but it's going to be comparable because even though Deno is written in Rust, it's still using V8, right?
Yeah.
And so is Node.
Yeah. So and it's all about who uses V8 better, I guess. So that's where Deno maybe has an advantage because it's running less code, right? Because it's been rewritten. So new architecture, presumably they can be more efficient with the way that they write the application layer, right?
those APIs.
Yeah, and if they do anything like, Bun is doing this a lot, but like writing any of the implementations in like native code instead of JavaScript,
okay,
like, the standard library, like there might be like, little edges you could eke out here and there, but it's going to be hard to say like, declaratively, since they all are like, both of them are using V8 under the hood. It's hard to say like, is this going to be faster or slower? I would say though, like another thing with that integrated DX and tooling is it's TypeScript first. So it's like
TypeScript first.
So the TypeScript is going to work real well in Deno right now. And it's kind of fledgling in Node, I think is like, you might hit some of those, those caveats that we were talking about.
Yeah. So there's a direct comparison. Like when you are going to run node index.ts, right? You're running a native TypeScript module. It actually is going to do the same thing in Deno when you do Deno run index.ts, where they both don't do type checking by default, right? So they just do the type stripping. So there's no real difference right there. But Deno does have the check command, which it does run TSC. So you can do Deno check, and then it'll run type checking against your app, and that uses TSC. So with Node, if you're a Node developer and you're trying to write a TypeScript app, you're going to have to run TSC manually yourself, right? Whereas with Deno, it's all just baked in for you, right? So that, again, that DX is kind of the selling point. And like I said, we're not experts on Deno, so we're going to have to do probably a lot more research to figure out exactly what's the decision criteria when you're like trying to move to Deno. I feel like at the start of it, I'm just thinking of like for a greenfield project, like Deno might be a better fit, especially if you're a TypeScript house. But if you're coming from Node.js and you're already familiar with all the APIs and everything, like I still think that there's a reason that you would use Deno because they've got the Node backwards compatibility. So you can still use all those NPM packages and all the Node APIs if you really want to.
Yeah. And that's new in Node 2. So,
yes.
Or excuse me, in Deno 2. Like,
yep.
Yeah. Cause like maybe you passed up on Deno 1X because of the lack of Node and NPM compatibility, which is totally fair. Like that's pretty much where I ran aground. I'm like, well, I need XYZ package to do my thing, and it's not supported. But now in Deno 2, they have improved, like you can use anything, and they've softened their philosophical stance on NPM compatibility with regards to common. So you can even use common NPM dependencies. So, which is, even though like at the beginning, Deno was very hardcore, like ESM only, but they don't allow you to make new common things or reference new common things only when you're talking to other modules that are in NPM.
Yep. And then there's the whole aspect of like JSR, which is the new registry that they're using for packages, which supports like native TypeScript documentation, which is pretty cool. So if you write your library or framework in Deno, then you've got a lot more documentation support built out.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably still a lot of other reasons you might want to use Deno. And then I think there's still plenty of reasons why you'd want to stick with Node.js.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you like operationally, how to run Node in your company. Like don't discount that. Like, the performance characteristics of Node, how to like monitor Node processes, how to do that. Like you probably want to like tiptoe into new technology, even though they're similar. Like the performance characteristics of Deno, like I don't know how different they are when you're running a production app at scale. That's something I'm going to have to try.
Yes. Yeah. We'll have to do like, I'm kind of interested to see, because they do have benchmarks and stuff. So I'd be really interested to see what is the actual runtime differences between like a Node 23 app that's using TypeScript versus, Deno. And at the end of the day, they're both compiling to JS. So I would expect that there's not going to be like a massive difference, but there still could be in terms of like, well, the HTTP server in Deno's, faster than using Express. But then like, what's the difference between a different Node library? I don't know. So there's still more to uncover there, I think.
Yeah, totally. I think if I had any advice, I'd say experiment and measure before you do anything. Don't just go in with both feet.
Yep. And I mean, part of our hope here, this is only the second episode, right? So we have half an idea of what we're doing, but we don't have a full idea of what we're doing. But I think one of the things that we really want to do is try to pick apart, these like decisions between like, when do I use Node, when do I use Deno? What are the big differences between them to help teams figure out what that is? Because I think that's where the interesting parts are.
Yeah. And Node's a workhorse. It's running a lot of the internet.
Ran Target when I was there. Target.com was that hundreds of Node containers running on Google Cloud. I mean, it runs some really big apps. We're getting closer to the end of the episode. I think we like to do like a little cool stuff segment. So like what TypeScript tips have you run into that you saw in the past week or so? What new stuff have you seen? I can share a couple ones that I saw. I know we had a little discussion about this in the Excalibur Discord, which was using the new satisfies keyword in TypeScript. And Matt Pocock has a great video, which he always does, on these language features. What's the difference between satisfies versus other things? And I think one of the things that I took away from that was that satisfies can be good for config typing. So if you need to type config. But I saw a tip from Cecile Mueller, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but you can use the satisfies never statement with catching missing case statements. So it's similar to like exhaustive switch blocks. So rather than like default case, you can say return, condition satisfies never. And then if you're missing a case statement, it'll throw a compiler error. So I thought that was a cool trick. So I
use this trick.
Oh, nice. So I'll link to that in the show notes. There's Cecile posted on Blue Sky with an example of that. The other thing that I saw was a TypeScript native window manager called DocView. So you've used Visual Studio Code. So you can like drag panels and they'll dock any different parts of the UI, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a library that is an abstraction over that. So it basically lets you create dockable window UI. And it supports vanilla TypeScript as well as, regular JavaScript and all that. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I have a link to that too. Have you seen anything cool lately?
Yeah, I think this is an oldie but a goodie. But I recommend this one to like anyone that's doing like configuration objects. Because if you tack a little, like a lot of times I'll have like a config file, like config ts, and I'll have like big, just like export const, config equals big,
object
that is just config values.
Yep.
And that works great. But did you know you can tack an as const on the back of that? And that'll keep you from accidentally like poking at any of the keys and updating your constants, because that const on the front just says it's a constant reference. It's kind of a misnomer. It's like, if you've ever like tried to decipher the consts in like C and C++ or C++, and like, what const is this meaning? Like what part of the constantness is this talking about? Because it gets pretty hairy there.
Yeah.
But, if you're doing config, do const as const. So like just tack that little as const on the end. And that's the TypeScript GUI. So that's the thing that's only TypeScript syntax. And that just says, hey, all of these keys are well known. They map from this type to this literal, so that you can, even in your like type hint, you will get like the literal value out instead of like, say like, you had a string constant and you'd be like, my thing, it would just be like, normally it'd be a string. But now that you have had add const, that it can say, it can infer even deeper, because that it's never going to change. So it's like, oh, this is not just a string. It is this literal string type.
Yep.
Which can be super useful, especially like later on, if you're doing like those discriminated unions that we were talking about, or type unions in your parameters. So I will say, use as const liberally to improve your life and avoid foot guns like accidentally mutating a constant.
Yes. Yeah, that's for sure a good tip. I love using as const. I don't even know when that was introduced.
I don't know either. I use it all the time though.
Good quality of life improvement, that's for sure.
Yeah. You both get like great type hints, and then also it prevents you from doing something silly.
Sweet. Well, I think that's a wrap on the show. So thanks everybody again for listening in. So like I said, this is our second episode, and that's a milestone in and of itself, because a lot of podcasts don't advance beyond episode 1.
Episode 1, doing a podcast.
We are doing a podcast, and like we said at the beginning, we're gonna commit to at least 12 weeks, and then we're gonna try to do a retrospective, see how it went. I think some of the things that we've defined now in the last week, like we know kind of what the success criteria for the show is, how we're going to measure it. We want to try to reach as much as the TypeScript community as possible. And that's not going to happen without your help. So, dear listener, you're a TypeScript developer. Please tell all of your TypeScript developer friends about the podcast and give us feedback. So the end of the show is going to have a little trailer on where to find us and where to send feedback. But please do, especially in these early days, because we really want this show to be designed around the community. So if you've got topics, if you have people that you think would be a great fit to come onto the podcast, if you yourself have something to say that's interesting to the TypeScript community, we want to hear from you. And we're going to start booking guests soon. Obviously, we wanted to show that we have some episodes in the bag. So that's why we're starting out with just ourselves, but we for sure want to get people onto the podcast, some great minds in the TypeScript community, and pick their brains and everything like that. So thanks again so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Hi, everyone. This is Kamran. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see the show notes, you can check your podcast player or go to typescript.fm, where you'll see a list of all the episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and please rate it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that's how the show grows and gets discovered by more people. If you want to suggest news or a project that should be covered, or just want to say hi, email us at feedback@typescript.fm. If you want to follow us on social, we're both active on Blue Sky. I'm at kamronigus.com and Erik is at erikonerheim.com. You can also follow the show directly at typescript.fm.